very much, Adiba. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us for this ICAD South Asia Regional Resilience Hub event. Today, we're talking about strengthening governance and scaling up solutions to accelerate implementation of locally led adaptation in South Asia. We're bringing together representatives from UN Capital Development Fund and UNDP for today's event, which covers an important issue in this run-up to COP, because while there's been growing cohesion around the locally led adaptation agenda, there's been somewhat less traction on the implementation of and identification of practical solutions for implementing that agenda and for identifying the good practices that can really deliver the robust governance frameworks and make sure that adaptation finance reaches communities at scale. Because remember, we've got very little time. Climate change is a global crisis, but the impacts of climate change are being felt most acutely at the local level. And this is where we need to get the finance to go so that communities can react and respond to the extent that they need to make the changes for the communities where they live. We have 4 speakers joining us today. I'll introduce you to them briefly one by one. We'll be starting with our esteemed visitor from Bhutan, and that's Vaska Chapagai. Hi there, Vaska. Vaska is a community representative. He's joining us from Bhutan, and he's going to give us some real community and insights into how these adaptation practices have been positively impacting both him as a community leader and the people that he represents. Then we'll be moving to my colleague Jesmal Hassan, joining from Dhaka, Bangladesh. He'll be explaining more about the Logic program, which uses the same mechanism for climate finance delivery that we're hearing about from Bhutan, but in a partnership with UNDP. Then we'll be moving to Luke Duffels-Alden, who will be giving a bit more insight into the mechanism that's being used in both these examples, which has been developed by UNCDF, and talking about how this is being applied across the South Asia region and perhaps opportunities for scale up also. And then we're going to be finally turning to representatives from UN Development Programme to talk more widely about UNDP activities across the region. Sadly, they're not yet in the call, but hopefully they'll be joining us just shortly in time for their final presentation. So that's the order of play. So I think you don't really need to hear much more from me. We need to move to our presenters. But first of all, we're going to start with a video from Bhutan, just to set the scene and remind us all of some of the challenges that the communities are facing and that we're seeking to address. So if I could ask my colleague Cedric to perhaps share the video. Thank you.
This bridge was made over a decade ago while piloting the locale methodology for locally led adaptation.
My name is Shishi Jamso, principal of Ramachan Primary School. The younger generation are the one who is going to lead the future. So the education is a must. So therefore, the community out here also, they know that the value of the education. This bridge, actually, it helps a lot for this community, as almost the 60% of the students are coming from that village. They have a temporary wooden bridge, which is very risky for the students. And what they do is they always try to come through this the connection road. They take almost 1 hour to reach the school. And if this bridge is not here, I guess that the student may not be able to attend the regular classes.
More adaptation investments soon followed, focusing on improving access for previously isolated rural communities, such as this 3-kilometre long farm road that connects 2 more villages to the school and other public services, and gives faster access to markets. First piloted here in 2010, the LOCAL mechanism and its performance-based climate resilience grants are today being integrated in the decentralised approach to adaptation across Bhutan. And with EU funding, has delivered more than 344 small-scale investments in over 100 GWs nationwide.
Kita lok ngara 2011 le di sane jo godang bona chama to tine misigi jabjo na chak tu bu telen local se yi de mingji go bela the pilot project ba jam gana ngachina wanu zo imagine photi ge obe the namshi nedang ani don benigi tega de pen to su jin da the zamdi me bajin chap de gi chudi the ji de thingin du su de chakdani ni khai do mola zam me be gale hema ya gi zam gule noya chakda e bala 아니 잠메다 노드세 추기 샥다니 빌라 데미스 냠 수로 강이 남지도 다디 아니 로컬 기잡주 토할레 잠드 수잡보다디 일로도베 bombe라 톱지 등가라 넘섬 예란디.
After 3 budget cycles using LOCAL, the long-term benefits of adaptation investments are having a catalytic effect.
This particular bridge is being built during the phase 3 of the LOCAL. It took around 3 months to complete the bridge, and it's been constructed by the community people. When we came for monitoring, we came to realize that the livelihood of the people over here is being improved by a double fold. We may say, like usually like they produce a potato as a cash crops, and then they could take it to the markets. The access to the market has been easier.
For farming communities in Pabika Valley, the contrast is clear.
Side bedding mo. Chema chege hema ki lamani dine baja na mo. Ani be gala truck this mithe ba mo. Te chasing so go be sema zam go be atar mo. Te sema zam go be ba mo. Halam lo khel hap chiti digi tur to ba mo.
Samme te hema didi that nalaba samme be namdi tigari hema didi te chitta ha kya go de aba hila.
In the olden days, they used to carry the potatoes on their back and the horses to reach to that road point. Then later road came, but they didn't have this concrete bridges here. So as a result, they had to carry those potatoes in the tractor to that particular road point, and then they have to again like tranship into the proper truck.
The successful scaling of LOCAL in Pobika and its integration in national systems in Bhutan provide a model for locally led adaptation that today is being replicated in 34 countries worldwide. LOCAL, financing locally led adaptation.
Thanks very much. I think that's a really nice video to start today's event, and really sets the scene and really brings to life some of the challenges that communities are facing, but also some of the great activities that are underway to make a change and make a difference. So perhaps I can turn to Vaska now, who's joining us from Bhutan. I know you've got a presentation ready there, Vaska. Are you able to share your screen? If so, I'll invite you to take the floor and let us, just to let everybody know, Vaska's internet connection's been a bit up and down. If he disappears, I may ask his colleague Netra to jump in on his behalf. But please, Vaska, the floor is yours. Great. Oh.
Uh, am I audible?
We can hear you loud and clear. Would you like us to share the presentation, or are you able to do that yourself? Ah, wonderful. Lovely.
Is that working?
It's coming. We don't seem to be able to see your screen, Vasca. Would you like someone to share on your behalf?
Resolving it.
I'm going to ask, let's have one more go, and then I'm going to ask Cedric to share his screen. He can share on your behalf, and then you can just concentrate on speaking to the slides. Shall we go with that? Cedric, would you, I think you've got a copy of the PowerPoint there. Maybe if we can ask Cedric to share his screen, and then there we go. And then Vasca, if you want to unmute your microphone, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay.
When you're ready to move to the next slide, just let Cedric know, and he'll move the PowerPoint along for you. Okay?
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
Good afternoon to all. My name is Bhaskar Chapagai, and I'm serving as a locally elected leader in Denchuka Gyok under Samtse Dzongkhak of Bhutan. To present, my topic is climate proofing of farm road and bridge to improve market access in Denchuka Gyok, Samtse, Bhutan. Next page. This is the pictorial evidence of the farm road. Today I'm going to present on background of the activity, experience and success story, challenges and issues in implementing climate change adaptation at Gyok level. Next. The project improvement of farm road from Changi to Kadri and construction of RCC culvert bridge was funded by UNDP in the fiscal year 2019 and 2020. The total budget outlay for the project was USD 15,662, which is equivalent to 1.3 million in Bhutanese currency, that is Niltram. The main aim of the project was to enhance climate resilience and adaptive capacity at the local level. The project benefited 85 households and 1,800 people of the Gawling Karjing helmet. Experiences and success story. With the implementation of the project, improvement of farm road from Changi to Kadri, the construction of RCC culvert bridge, it had benefited 85 household data source from Jiok Thokpa of Gawling Karjing Jiok in the following ways. The farmers were able to export 100 metric tons of ginger, 60 metric tons of oranges, 2 metric tons of acornut, 3 metric tons of butter and cheese, and 1 metric tons of mango and lychee yearly. This data was collected from Gyok Agriculture Extension Officers. Next. Improved access to farms during adverse weather conditions, ensuring the farmers to transport goods to market and receive supplies even after heavy rains or floods. Facilitate timely access to field for planting, harvesting, and other essential activities, potentially leading to better crop yields and reduced losses. Help rural communities remain connected and functional during extreme weather events enhancing overall community resilience. Challenges and issues in implementing climate change adaptability in GEOC level. Limited financial resources. Local governments often have constrained budgets, making it difficult to allocate funds for climate adaptation projects, which can be expensive. Insufficient technical expertise. Implementing climate adaptation measures requires specialized knowledge and skills that local governments may lack. This can hinder effective planning and execution of the project. Political and public resistance. Climate adaptation initiatives may face opposition from local stakeholders who are skeptical about the need for such measures or who fear potential disruptions to their current way of life. Uh, Data and information gaps. Accurate and localized climate data is essential for effective planning. Local governments may struggle with insufficient or outdated data, which hampers ability to make informed decisions. Thank you. That is my presentation.
Thank you very much, Vasca. That was great, and I know that you had to try and pack a lot of information in there into just a very short amount of time. I just wondered if I could maybe ask for a couple of points of clarification, because you said that the investment in the farm road enabled the community to export ginger, mangoes, butter, other produce, even in bad weather. Can you tell me, was that not the case then before the improvement was made? Was that something that was not possible before?
Before improvement of that road and construction of the RCC culvert bridge, there was a challenging time the farmers are facing at that particular place. That time, public were not able to transport their goods to the nearest market, which leads there to burden the huge losses.
Mm.
So after that road has been improved and the bridge has been constructed, they are benefited in highly benefited. So public people of that place could transport their locally produced vegetables and fruits to the nearest market within a short period of time. So that improvement of road and the bridge has benefited the public of that particular place, and as a whole the public of the GEOC has been benefited.
Excellent. And part of along with the investment, if I understand correctly, there's also been support with capacity building and training for yourself and your team, if I understand correctly, to help address the challenges that you mentioned of limited technical expertise and resources. Is that right?
Yes. So at our GEOC local level, we don't have expertise in combating climate resilience, climate change. So we have to definitely seek help from the external agencies who have better ideas comparing to us. Within Bhutan also, I don't think there are the climate expertise. So definitely the country as a whole has to seek support from the other countries to combat climate change. So as per my planning and my thinking, the GEOC, the local level must ensure some trainings to the local people, to the of the locally elected leaders. They also have to given the priority of climate resilience, the how to mitigate the climate change, and some financial portion must be allocated to combat climate change. So I think, and I am also working according to these principles to combat climate change in my area.
Great. I think that's a really important point, that it's not just about the investment in small scale infrastructure with big impact, of course, but also the investment in the systems there themselves, the investment in the local governance. I think that's where you can really make a difference and sort of build capacity and empowerment for future work, not just on one project, but going forwards. Excellent. Thank you very much, Vasco. Please stay on the line, because I think it would be lovely for you to stay involved, and if there's any questions as we move through today's event. For now, though, the clock is ticking. I think it's time to move to Bangladesh.
Thank you so much.
And if I could ask Jesmol, please, I know you've prepared a presentation. If you could have that ready while Cedric shows the video to introduce the Logic program, which is operating in Bangladesh.
এখন জোয়ারে যে সময় পানি উঠে যায় সে সময় হচ্ছে আমাদের এই রাস্তা আশেপাশে যে রাস্তাগুলো আছে বা আমার এই যে ঘরের যে টোঙের যে ঘরের যে উঠার যে পথগুলো আছে সেগুলো সব পানিতে তলায় যায়। এখন সেখানে আমাদের যুদ্ধ করে তো বাঁচতে হয়, কারণ জলের পানির সাথে তো যুদ্ধ করতেই হয় আমাদের, যার উপরে আমরা টুকরো বানার মতো ভেসে বেড়াই। এখানে তো আমাদের প্রধান সমস্যা তো পানির সমস্যা। পানির সমস্যা এটা এখন বৃষ্টি মৌসুমের সময় আমরা যাদের যতটুকু পাত্র আছে সেখানে ভরে রাখি। বৃষ্টি মৌসুম শেষ হয়ে গেলে আমাদের আর খাওয়ার পানির কোনো উপায় থাকে না, সে সময় আমাদের অনেক দূরে। আগে তো আমরা সে পুকুর থেকে আনতেছি, অনেক দূর থেকে আপনার আছে, নিরাপদ না সে পানি, যাকে আমাদের ছেলেমেয়েরা অসুস্থ হয়, নিজেরাই অসুস্থ হয়ে পড়ি।
দৈনিক প্রায় 50,000 লিটার পানি পাচ্ছে। সেই ট্রিটমেন্ট প্ল্যান্টটা পুকুরের পানি বা রেইন ওয়াটারের পানি সেটাকে ট্রিটমেন্ট করে বিশুদ্ধ পানিতে রূপান্তর করছে। যখন মানুষ পানি নিতে আসে একটা নির্দিষ্ট পরিমাণ পানি নেওয়ার জন্য তারা কার্ড নিয়েছেন এবং মহিলারা নিজে থেকে কার্ড দিয়ে তারা পানি নিয়ে যান।
ওই অঞ্চলের মানুষ ওই ওয়াটার ট্রিটমেন্ট প্ল্যান্ট থেকে পানি নিয়েই তাদের সুপেয় পানি অভাব উঠেছে। এই কারণে আমি মনে করি যে লজিক প্রজেক্ট এই জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনজনিত কারণে যে সমস্ত ক্ষতি হচ্ছে সেগুলো অ্যাড্রেস তো করে, তার সাথে সাথে কমিউনিটি পর্যায়ে এবং মহিলাদের উন্নয়নে ব্যাপক ভূমিকা রাখছে বলে আমি মনে করি।
আমরা এই লজিক থেকে পাওয়া এই যে জলের প্ল্যান্টটা এ করে হয়তো আমাদের অনেক লোকেরই আগের থেকে এই জলের যে অভাবটা হয়তো এই বছর থেকে আমাদের অনেকটা কমে দাঁড়াবে আর কি।
স্বল্প মূল্যে যে জলটা পাবো সেটা আমাদের জীবিকা নির্বাহ হবে এবং বিশুদ্ধ পানি পান করতে পারবো। এর থেকে কিছুটা সুবিধা তো আমরা পাচ্ছি।
Thank you very much. A very nice introduction to the work that's being undertaken in Bangladesh. And I think it's quite typical, because I know that access to water is a big issue and a focus of much of the adaptation work that's taking place with the Logic team there in Bangladesh. But to hear more about it, let's hand over now to Jesmol Hassan. Jesmol, the floor is yours.
Can colleagues see my screen?
Yes, we can see it, although I think we're on the last slide at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I'm Jesmul. I'm speaking from Bangladesh. It is nice meeting you all. I'm going to share with you some characteristics of Logic program, which is a joint project of UNDP and UNCDF. It is being implemented in Bangladesh since 2017. We finished first 6 years of implementation with $35 million budget. Now we are implementing 2 years extension with a $10 million budget. So you are seeing a snapshot of the project. Total beneficiaries that we are targeting in this project is 500,000.
Sorry, Jasmine, just to interrupt, I'm sorry. I think we're just seeing the final screen, or at least I am. It seems to be hung up on the last part of your PowerPoint. I don't know if you can refresh or perhaps make sure that you're sharing from the very beginning. There we go. Now I can see the project overview. I think we're all good.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt your flow. There you go. Over to you again.
Okay. Now, can you see my screen? Project overview?
Yes, project overview. Yes.
Okay. So this is overview of the extension phase, which is for 2 years, started last year and will end in 2025. So we are covering so far 500,000 beneficiaries, and for extension period, it is going to be 100,000 additional beneficiaries. We are working through 94 union parishad, which is the lowest tier of local government in Bangladesh. In the extension phase, we are working with 29 Upazila Parishad, second lowest tier of local government, plus civil society organizations, other local institutions, and government officials. We are being supported by Denmark, Sweden in the extension phase, plus UNDP and UNCDF's own contribution. Key executing entities at the local level for the adaptive infrastructures which UNCDF is responsible for, it is local government entities, that is Upazila Parishad. And for resilient livelihoods, it is resilient cooperatives being set up and supported by UNDP. So these are the major activities of the Logic in extension phase. That is, we are working on localizing national adaptation plan for locally led adaptation planning and financing, improving capacities of climate vulnerable households for local level adaptation in 2 new additional districts. We have developed climate vulnerability.
I'm sorry to interrupt again. I think we're not moving through the slides.
Oh.
We're still on project overview.
I don't know what is happening. I am pushing, but somehow it is not going there. I don't know.
Should we ask Cedric to perhaps share the backup screen?
Please.
Let's do that.
I think that's better.
Are you okay to just jump in here, please, Cedric? I know that there's a copy on file of the PowerPoint. I'm sure these connection issues are causing our presenters the headaches. We'll just give Cedric to queue that up, a moment to queue that up for you, Jesmul, and then you can recommence. I'm sorry, it is a bit tricky. Here we go. I think this is where you should have been, right? Over to you again, Jesmul.
Yes, perfect. So we are developing, we are doing the climate vulnerability assessments for communities, and also by downscaling the NAP, we have developed the local adaptation plan of action for each Upazila where we are working in. UNDP colleagues are implementing climate resilient fund for household level and cooperative level livelihood projects. Now in the extension phase, we are working to strengthen the value chain development and market linkages. With PBCIG, we are implementing infrastructures, adaptive infrastructures, and I have seen one rainwater harvesting in the video. We are also working with the government in terms of policy advocacy, how to increase allocation on the basis of climate finance. And for that, we have developed a climate vulnerability index for all the local government tiers of the country. And we are also working for developing a proposal for financing for green climate fund. Next slide, please. Yes, so these are some of the photos that you are seeing. These are climate adaptive livelihoods being supported by UNDP. You are seeing duck rearing, the cold pressed coconut oil that is being produced by the cooperatives, watermelon. These are women beneficiaries. They are doing trade on watermelon and also sheep rearing and fishery, the crab hatchery and fishing that they're doing. These are some of the infrastructures that you are looking at, the solar power irrigation, the floating bridge, the shelter which has been constructed in the wetland. And this shelter is providing support to the farmers and the fishermen to protect them from thunderbolt, which has increased in recent years due to global warming. And also you're seeing women beneficiaries taking water from rainwater harvesting system. Children are going to school over a bridge which was not there. And this bridge has been constructed to connect a vulnerable island with the mainland. Next slide, please, Cedric. So the key theme of my presentation is how two UN agencies are working together in a coordinated way for implementing a climate resilient or climate adaptation project. So at the national level, there is a common work plan which includes activities of both UNDP and UNCDF with differentiated responsibilities and chart of accounts. There is one common project steering committee and project implementation committee. Steering committee provides strategic guidance and advisory, and implementation committee monitors update and gets update about the implementation status. One project director is responsible for the whole project, under which the whole PMU works. PMU is the project management unit where staff from both the agencies are located, and they provide kind of management support from central level to the local level. So there we have got segregation of staff between the two agencies, but all people work together in one project management unit. Next slide, please, Cedric. Okay, now here you see how coordination is ensured at different level, at district level, at Upazila level, and the Union Parishad level. At the district level, in each district, there is one government office where project colleagues from both the agencies sit together, and they provide support for their respective component. UNDP colleagues basically for resilient livelihood and cooperative, and UNCDF colleagues basically for PBCRG through local government. So but in implementation of many activities, they jointly participate together. For example, common activities like project monitoring, survey, data collection, all these things, they work together. Both DCC and DCFC, they work together. And also whenever any advisory or any specific instruction is provided from PMU to the local level, both the colleagues, they work together with the local level government official, basically deputy director of local government, in terms of conveying the messages, and work with them in terms of planning, budgeting, implementation of NIM or national implementation activities. All these things, they work together. At the Union Parishad level, particularly the CRF beneficiaries or Community Resilience Fund beneficiaries, they are located at the very community level. So their identification is done by the UNDP supported colleagues, while the scheme identification, that is done by UNCDF colleagues. Also on implementation of climate adaptive livelihood options, that monitoring is done by UNDP colleagues, and PBCRG scheme implementation is monitored by UNCDF's colleagues, but they do it together because they share information regularly. They sit together and they share information regularly in terms of beneficiary selection, in terms of spot check selection, in terms of design estimation and everything. But at the Upazila level, since UNCDF flows its fund to the Upazila level, so PBCRG scheme is particularly identified, reviewed, approval, and payment clearance. All these take place at the Upazila level. So these are the 4 tiers or levels where UNDP and UNCDF colleagues work together. Next slide, please, Cedric. So some of the operational aspects of 2 UN agencies working together, I'd like to brief here. With both agencies, we use common UNDP human resources, procurement, finance, and other administration services. In Quantum, which is kind of software that both the agencies use, there are 2 different Quantum, one for UNDP and one for UNCDF, but we work in a complementary basis. For example, UNDP has provided access to Quantum for PMU colleagues, which include both UNDP and UNCDF. And whenever support is required from UNCDF Quantum, then we have our staff here who provide that support to the PMU staff in terms of financial monitoring or procurement or vendor creation or whatever is required. Both UNDP and UNCDF use a national implementation modality for providing operational support to local government division, that is the key interlocutor of the government and the district level offices. And some of the activities are implemented directly by UNDP and UNCDF in their direct implementation modality. So these are some of the operational aspects of the joint project being implemented by UNDP and UNCDF at the country level. And thank you. That's all from my side.
Thanks very much there. Thanks very much, Jesmal. Maybe just to like recap a little bit on the broader picture, UNCDF is effectively designed the mechanism for getting the money from donors to communities that's in place. I saw you referred to it in your presentation, and it's this implementation of performance-based climate resilience grants. This is part of this locale mechanism that was designed by UNCDF and is being used in this joint program, this joint UNCDF-UNDP program, to get money to the ground level in Bangladesh. But as I'm going to turn to Luke shortly to explain a bit more about that mechanism and how it works. But Jesmal, maybe you could just give us a couple of insights from Bangladesh. You know, what are the merits really of working in this kind of joined up way with UNCDF, UNDP to work on adaptation in Bangladesh?
Okay, UNDP has expertise in certain areas, whereas UNCDF has expertise in other areas. For example, on the climate risk assessment, climate vulnerability assessment, the scientific projections, these are traditionally UNDP's areas of work. So in this joint project, they kind of provided the lead in terms of climate risk assessment, climate vulnerability index, capacity building, policy advocacy, and all these things. While UNCDF's PBCRG mechanism has been used for basically investment in local public goods for climate resilience, which UNDP doesn't do. So you see there, but we also use UNDP's expertise in terms of climate modeling, in terms of climate projections, vulnerability assessment, in designing, identifying, and approval of the public goods or schemes that is being funded by UNCDF. So you see there, here is the complementary. UNDP provides us the data, the projections, the risk assessments, and we use that for investing in public goods. Over.
Great, very clear. Thank you very much. It'd be good to maybe look at that a little bit more through our next speakers, but I think that's a really good summary of how this sort of coming together of two very different organizations is producing sort of impact at the community level. Next up is our speaker from Pakistan, and this is Luke Duffels Alden. Hi there, Luke. I'm going to turn the floor to you. Are you able to share your PowerPoint? If not, we can support you to do that.
Hi, Sarah. I should be able, yes.
I'll give you just a moment to set that up. I know it takes a little while to get it all ready once you've got the floor. And Luke's going to be giving us a bit more depth on this, this approach, this mechanism that's being at play and being used so effectively in both Bhutan and Bangladesh.
Can you see my screen?
It's just, yes, I can see it. Okay, I will pass you the floor, Luke. Really, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So yeah, it's a pleasure to join you online, indeed from Pakistan, but I am not Pakistani nor from the region. I am Brazilian, and so learning a lot about the region through the mechanism and through workshops such as this one. So it's really a pleasure. And thanks to both Bhutan and Bangladesh for showing results from practice and how all of this is done. What I will try to do very briefly, so please do ask questions so that I can also dig deeper, is to present to you what is this mechanism about? So why do we do it? Where do we do it? And what we try to do with a little bit more abstraction from actual results of practices. What you will see in this presentation is a lot of bridges as perhaps a symbol of governance and trying to connect. And you also see as many pictures as women and girls as we could find, because in contexts where the most vulnerable live, work, study, women and girls are the ones who suffer the most from the impacts and from the shocks of climate change. So while the panel is 3 men, we keep in mind that they are also the ones we try to focus on, and the mechanism does also try to put women back into the decision-making processes at that level. If I can change the slide, yes, I can. So, and precisely, I was supposed to change the slide while saying this. This is an example of Sarata in the Gambia, who is precisely a decision maker, but also because of the specific way of why it's being implemented in the Gambia, she was it was the cash for work kind of implementation mechanism, and she was one of the people building the bridge, and so also developing those specific technical skills for climate adaptation in a similar objective as the one presented in Bangladesh, where floods sort of blocked access to health and education services. So why do we do it? Well, everywhere in the world, and South Asia is no different. There's a lack of direct access to resources for climate change adaptation, which usually costs more money than business as usual. And so there is even more need to access money. There might be a lack or weak institutional capacities, coordination, working between levels of government or between departments of the same government. So there is a need to incentivize, support such collaboration at the level of government, but also with the communities, with the civil society, with the universities or academia, broadly speaking. And last but not least, the capacity to absorb the incremental cost of climate change adaptation in particular, and being able to prove that we are indeed spending the money where it is needed, so that it's not just a plan, but an actual budget and an actual investment is being delivered, as you saw in the case of Bhutan. Specifically, the local mechanism works on the one hand, integrating climate change adaptation into the planning and budgeting systems, and making sure that they are done in a participatory way. So the way to do it matters, and it's definitely one of the performance measures I will talk about in a couple of minutes, but also pilots and accompany the governments in setting up a performance-based climate resilient grant. So a country-led mechanism of fiscal transfers from the national government to the local governments, the spending unit, that guarantees, that earmarks budgets to be spent on climate change adaptation at the local level, based on those plans that have been informed by climate science, by data, by information, and by participation of the communities. So what does the mechanism look like? Well, we've tried to summarize it with this scheme. Broadly speaking, there is available international and domestic finance. The thing is, we need to support governments, and we try to support governments with other agencies, but also with other partners, such as in South Asia. I'm thinking about ICIMOD, and many others, to come up with proposals, technical proposals that can attract international money. And that money goes into the existing fiscal transfer mechanism from the central government all the way to the local governments in the form of a grant. As I said, the PBCRG, you heard Jasmine in Bangladesh talk about it, that comes as an earmarked support for the local governments to make local adaptation investments in against an investment menu that we prepare with them. What we do is that we look into the risks that exist at that level, at the community level, with a level of granularity that is not always available. So we work to achieve also that level of granularity. And I think Bangladesh is a great example of how that can be achieved. And we set and we support the local governments and the local councillors in particular and the civil servants at that level to come up with a plan and a budget, but also performance measures against which the program will be assessed over the cycle at the end of the year, independently assessed, of course. Those are number 2, the annual performance assessments, and number 3, based on those results, a technical and capacity building support throughout the year, throughout the project, but also perhaps to answer any specific needs. Of course, the disbursement or the money flows to the local governments, so the local governments become part of the pilot or become part of a bigger scheme based on minimum conditions. There needs to be a minimum set of conditions for those local governments to be part of this mechanism. Also because if you set performance measures, you don't want to trick and put the bar too high, but rather do something that is tailored, that is adapted to the cohort of local governments that are part of the mechanism. This mechanism has been acknowledged at international level, in particular as a non-existing market approach, and is an existing non-market approach by the UNFCCC, but also with an ISO standard, which builds sort of a creditworthiness also to the international climate finance, saying, well, the countries that are leading the mechanism are doing it following a very specific methodology and with the quality control that is attached to it, and that creates confidence, creates additional trust into how the money is flowing and where the money is going. And then to it, there is a specific way of doing monitoring and evaluation, but also learning. Learning from the practice, learning from the experiences, and South Asia in particular is promoting this sort of South-South learning or cooperation between the countries of the region. At the moment, with the support of Sweden, with the support of the Swedish Development Agency, SIDA, but also in showcasing our experiences in international events, such as the COP29 that is upcoming, and showing, well, results, that this is not just another plan, but rather actual investments happening on the ground. Local in the world and is 38 countries, but 20 with operational grants, so where the mechanism is working every year. 10 of these countries are in Asia Pacific, and 7 of the countries in Asia Pacific are least developed countries, but also I'm thinking about Pakistan, which is now a low HDI, so it's not least developed countries, but the effect of climate change have dramatically impacted Pakistan, and therefore justifies also the need of a mechanism such as Local. The mechanism, as you might have seen the previous slide, works in phases. So countries such as Pakistan are under a design phase where we make a proposal to the national government or the provincial government in saying, well, this is based on your existing mechanisms, based on the situation on the ground. This is how we propose to develop. And these are, you know, the actionable, the anchored systems or programs in your country where the local mechanism could be an add-on. And then with their agreement, because they are the driving force, because it's a country-led mechanism, we move into phase 1 where we pilot with a couple of local governments or over a couple of fiscal years. Then we move into phase 2. And I guess Bangladesh has been at this stage where it's been consolidated and a growing number of local governments join or receive funds from that mechanism. And then you move into And I think Nepal and Laos are also transitioning to that phase 2, and then you move into a national scale-up, which is the case of Bhutan that you have heard of, but also Cambodia, where there is an ambition for national rollouts and less need for technical support at the local government level, but rather in attracting more money to be channeled through the existing mechanism. I'm moving on, and the last point I want to make is that this mechanism over the last 13 years has evolved, and we have also increased our own capacities to answer to the needs and to the reality of climate change, promoting in particular, for example, nature-based solutions, with the idea that, when we look at infrastructure, when we look at the engineering that is necessary, we can also use that as an opportunity to use, bioengineering, for example, using soil or promoting reforestation, promoting regeneration of wetlands, land stabilization, and all of this by promoting biodiversity, by making sure that nature is regenerated and protected. And that is definitely part of the mix. And that is also using knowledge from the communities, knowledge from the ground, autochthonous knowledge to some extent, in addition to the data science and all the engineering that comes with building the bridges that you have been seeing. I'll end there, and I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you very much, Luke. That was great, and I think that provided a really solid basis to understanding the approach that is working behind the scenes to get this money from the donors or from international financial institutions down through national government systems and to local government representatives who represent the closest level of government to the communities, to make sure that there's as close access to finance to the ground level as possible for adaptation investment. I think Luke raised a really important point there, and that's that one of the target beneficiaries for all this work across all the regions where it's in operation are women and children and other vulnerable groups. And although we do have a lot of men represented on this panel, I hope that the videos today really brought home that message that, of course, these priority groups, the women and children, are given priority access, and their needs are certainly heard and responded to in all the work that's being done by our teams across the region. Now, we are hoping now to turn to UNDP for their intervention to talk more widely about UNDP's activities across the South Asia region. I didn't see our speaker, Asad Makan, join the call. I don't know if there's some kind of technical problem, but is there anyone from UNDP who's able to join? And I can't identify you who can step in on Asad's behalf. I don't see that we do. Apologies about that, because I think that's an important part of today's discussion. And perhaps I might be able to call on Luke and Jesmal a little bit to maybe give us their insights on more widely what's going on in the South Asia region for adaptation. And perhaps, Jesmal, we could start with going a little bit further on your presentation. Maybe there's some lessons learned on the coordination and the work with UNCDF and UNDP that others in the region could learn from. Do you think that there's insights and experience there that we could gain from the Logic program that are relevant for adaptation work across South Asia as a whole?
Yes, I think the key insight is understanding, mutual understanding of both the agencies. There are two UN agencies, but each should have kind of clear understanding about the mandate of other agencies, the capacity of each agency, the limitation of each agency. That is one. When we started working in designing the logic in 2014-15, we had this mutual understanding with UNDP colleagues. So that is why we could come up with a joint project designing. Then since then on, in implementation, in monitoring, in extension, we are working together, and we maintain this respect and understanding that there are some areas where UNDP has an advantage, there are some areas where UNCDF has advantage, and these advantages could be shared together in working together so that the implementation can be effective and successful. But also there are other areas where the agencies can exchange their kind of technical knowledge and expertise. For example, when UNDP invested in household level livelihood grants, initially they started with direct cash transfer to households. Then from there they went to group formation, and then from there they went to cooperative formation. But from our side, UNCDF side, we provided them advice that, okay, only cooperative based business is not enough. You have to make them bankable so that for getting attracting funding from international agencies like Green Climate Fund or other fund, you can make these cooperatives or other livelihood institutions more bankable and linked to the market. So they have taken this advice from our side, because UNCDF has this expertise on blended financing. We have worked in SME financing in other countries as well, and in Bangladesh. So we have shared this expertise with UNDP colleagues as well. But at the same time, on the policy advocacy, like the technicality of the climate vulnerability index, it was fully led by UNDP colleagues. But on many occasions, in terms of mainstreaming it in the government agenda, it is UNCDF which has played kind of very important role. Because, say, for example, in our current allocation formula, we did not include climate vulnerability index in other countries, but in Bangladesh we have included it. So when UNDP started working on policy advocacy on CVI, climate vulnerability index, with government, we also provided input that, okay, currently the government is allocating fund on the basis of population, territory, and performance, but there is a scope to include climate vulnerability. So that has added value to our work as well, because we are now providing PBCH on allocation formula, and our expertise along with UNDP CVI has kind of developed or matured the whole allocation formula into an advanced stage where climate vulnerability has become a very important criteria for intergovernmental fiscal transfer, right? So each year, each unit of local government in Bangladesh from next year will get something, at least 35% of their allocation to be used for climate vulnerability or climate adaptive investments. So you see, these are kind of value of working together, two agencies with their respective technical expertise to produce effective results.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jaswal. I think that was really nice little addition there, just to see that coming together of the two agencies. And as you say, you know, the UNDP, the larger agency, but UNCDF with this very sort of specific role and experience in blended finance that can really sort of fine tune how projects are implemented and maximize the results there. Luke, perhaps there's more to be said about the South Asia region at the moment. I mean, we're fast coming up on COP29. I'm afraid I'm kind of jumping on you here a little bit, because I was kind of hoping to sort of have this kind of discussion with our colleagues from UNDP. But as we move into the finance COP in Baku, what do you really hope, as you see them, the experiences that you hope are taken to COP29 from South Asia in this work on adaptation?
Yeah, and possibly moving a bit out of my area of expertise here, but I mean, building on what we're saying, we hope, and this is, I guess, the benefit of having a mechanism or having a project that is country-led. We hope that the countries that are part of this and who are presenting more proposals to the Green Climate Fund, for example, which I think every country in the region, and I'm excluding Pakistan, who's also technically not South Asia, has received or presented at least a couple of proposals to the GCF. And so together as a cohort of countries that are implementing local, but that have a similar thought process on how international finance should be channeled to the local governments and why it should be channeled to the local governments. You have a joint advocacy, a joint messaging that can be presented to COP, to the other countries, but to the different financing institutions that exist, whether they are mechanisms under the UNFCCC, or whether it's bilateral cooperation, or whether it's another multilateral bank program, or whichever. So my point is having a shared message and which is built together throughout the year, but specifically during the board, which at the board of local happened a couple of weeks ago, last week. Having this message also being mainstream across the agencies that are partnering and that are using that logic, and so that by force of repeating, you actually get some traction.
Very good. I mean, I think if we're going to get results at COP29 or indeed at any international gathering, then operating as a region and as a bloc can only amplify messages and make the delivery that much stronger. I see we have Vivek Misra here from UNDP. Hi there, Vivek.
Hi, Sarah.
Hello there. I hope I'm not
late. I got the message late, so I just quickly joined in.
Thank you very much. It's great. I'm glad that you managed to join there. Perhaps you didn't manage to catch all of the previous presentations, but we've just heard some excellent interventions from community leaders in Bhutan, project coordinators in Bangladesh, and had some regional oversights of UNCDF, UNDP activities in adaptation across the South Asia region from Luke also. I was wondering if you could throw that a bit wider now. Maybe you could give us a bit more insight, Vivek, into what UNDP is prioritizing on adaptation across the South Asia region at this important time, just, months outside of COP29.
Yeah, sure. I think adaptation has been increasingly being important priority, given that we look at expenditure patterns, we look at climate finance flows, and we see the significant investment in mitigation. And what we find is that adaptation comes from usually the public finance side and less from the private finance side. While we work on the public finance and both private finance side, we are seeing that governments are, when we analyze the expenditure patterns from the public expenditure budgets, particularly for those countries which do a CPIR, climate budget tagging, or expenditure reviews, we see that almost 80 to 90% of the expenditure is on adaptation in Asia Pacific. When you look at the NDCs and NAPs, and you're looking at adaptation financing strategies on NAP or NDCs, you see quite a different approaches to adaptation financing without clear kind of guidelines on how to go about financing adaptation. So what we are doing, therefore, is we are working on developing adaptation financing strategy guidelines in order to bring some kind of a standardization, uniformity in approaches across different institutions on how to finance adaptation. Secondly, because adaptation needs are not just at financial incentives at a national level, but because it is much more granular, and therefore we are talking about locally led adaptation initiatives, and therefore what planning guidelines, how financing can actually go down, and that UNCDF would have definitely shared our joint programming in 5 LDCs on using the local methodology of PBCRGs but our value add to that would be that our working both at the national level with the ministries of finance and with the sectoral ministries, depending on countries where they have prioritized which sectors, so we can have a very complementary approach in basically the UNDP expertise with ministries of finance, climate budgeting, climate planning, climate appraisals, investment appraisals, climate budget tagging, and then linking at the local level, and then that can hopefully make it sustainable in the long term. It can create institutional sustainability, that it's not just a PBCRG, a one-time mechanism, but can it be made part of the intergovernmental fiscal transfer system, and therefore tracked, monitored, reported on, and made more transparent and accountable. So these are some of the things which we have been doing. And I mean, broadly, our expertise has been in mainstreaming and institutionalizing climate finance, public finance reforms at the national sectoral level. So this is an opportunity to work with UNCDF to also take it down to the local government level. Having said that, that's on the public finance side. On the private finance side, I think we need to do more. I will admit that at the local level, UNCDF and UNDP have to do more on looking at instruments, financial mechanisms in order to mainstream and bring about, have options, including public-private partnerships. How can private financing, PPPs, come about at a local level, which is a big challenging ask, given that it's very difficult to activate it even at a national sectoral level. So I'll stop here. I can answer any question.
Thank you very much, Vivek. That was a great addition. I just want to remind anyone who's in the audience, if you want to ask a question for any of our speakers today, you can drop that in the chat, or do feel free to raise your hand and ask it directly. We've finished with our presentation, so the floor is open for discussion now. We have a few minutes left. I'll start with a question while we give everyone a little bit of time to think, and maybe because I think it's always good, I think we've shown a lot of positive impact. We've demonstrated that some successes and advancement is underway, but it's nice to hear from Vivek also on that more needs to be done. And it's important in these kind of environments that we raise issues where we think there needs to be more and better work I was wondering if there's any of our other speakers have anything to add on this question of how do we get private sector finance moving to the ground level to work on adaptation? Are there any experiences from your respective countries that could perhaps give any insights for others on the call, any lessons learned, or any words of caution? I mean, any thoughts on the matter? The floor is open, and I see a hand is raised. So I'm going to pass the floor to Luke, please. The floor is yours.
Thanks. It's in between words of caution and at the same time where we can improve the way we encourage our partners to look for more financing. I mean, if we're talking about the local level, often a formal private sector or a private sector that is, in the capacity to invest might also not exist, or there might also be so much need to do something quickly that there might also be a misunderstanding between what is sort of a public investment and how after that a private investment comes in. And so it's always interesting to have that conversation, for example, in the case of PPPs, whether the legal system allows for local government to enter into a PPP. Yep. That is one question. But if it does, then what should the PPP, this public-private partnership, be about? Because there are risks for the private and for the public sector parties in that partnership, in that relationship. There are interests. I mean, we cannot ask the private sector to be something it is not. It needs to care for commercial viability. It needs to care for its interest. We can always throw away saying there will be no interest in the future if we don't act now. Indeed, but at the same time, it does need to care for its shareholders, its viability, its own. It can't collect taxes to exist, so it needs things to function for itself. So I guess my point is, looking at the countries in the region, which and including Pakistan, we might be working in environments where the private sector does not exist in the same shape and form as we think about it from a distance in reports or thinking about it theoretically from a distance. So it's always about understanding what is on the ground, what is and who are the private sector, whether it's a big national company that might be interested in a specific area or very small ecosystem of different entrepreneurs, sort of say. Yeah, over to you.
Thanks very much, Luke. That's interesting about, the question of what legal system is in place, how we mitigate any risks, understanding the interests that are at play when you're working with the private sector. Perhaps we're not always as on the ball as we could be with that. But Vivek, is there any of Luke's points raised any issues for you? Anything that you want to perhaps add to that?
Yeah. And also responding to the couple of questions here. So the first is, when you're looking at local projects, so how do you define local? What is the scale that you're talking about? Are we talking about small community, local government implemented projects, typically controlled, designed, developed by a local government? Or such investments? Are we looking at province or region? Like in India, you will have a state, but it's still subnational. It's because it's a big country, but other countries may have different federal structures. So that is important as how to define the local element in it. That will define, therefore, Luke's point on, say, who has the sovereign, how is the powers devolved in order to define what. So, for example, a public-private partnership at the federal level could be implemented, could also be the sub-national level could also have powers, but it varies from one country to another. A standardized concessionaire agreement developed at the national level could be applied at the local level. But if those powers are given to the subnational governments, so it varies from context to context. And there was a question on PPP. So Philippines has some really good experience on having a central PPP center that actually has institutionalized climate investments through the PPP mode at different level. But I'm not sure if it is locally led. It's still federally controlled, federally implemented. But you can have basic. So, for example, rural roads, for example. Now, if you find a potential private investor, and you could have, I'm not talking about village roads, I'm talking of slightly bigger roads, maybe state roads, where you could put it, because that will make it viable for a private sector to invest. I'm not sure if a private sector would want to invest in a village road without potential revenue streams. So one has, it's therefore it will vary from context to context, and the scale matters, the revenue streams matter. Yes, we are now exploring something which, well, a lot of it is we don't have examples where we can showcase success, but say, for example, if we are working on, say, blended finance instruments at a national level, which imagine it to be a facility that can be used by subnational government. You dip into it and you say that, okay, I need some kind of so maybe a part of it, a very small part of it initially is funded by the government in order to sweeten the deal or to risk minimize for the private sector. And then the private sector or some parts of the private sector want to feel that it is okay, it's attractive enough for us to also invest in it. But again, the clause here, the political economy is, well, climate finance works like any finance. So the risks that are attendant to any finance, the favoritism or the cronyism, the political economy of any finance is associated with climate finance. So one needs to be careful in order that who is going to take that, which private sector is going to invest in that. Also, we need to be very careful about when you're structuring, brokering these kind of deals.
Yeah, indeed, good point there. And I see that our community leader and representative from Bhutan, Vasak, is raising his hand. Are you wanting to make a point there? Please, Vaska, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. If I share the same story which I just presented just before, now my job, I am focusing on climate resilience and mitigation. So what I did was I sought a helping hand from European Union, requesting for a fund. So I wrote a proposal to European Union. Finally, the European Union has revised my proposal and has granted a sum of 1.5 million Bhutanese neutrum for my job to combat climate change and mitigation works to be carried out during this fiscal year 24-25. And as I am doing, if other countries could also sort help from external funding agencies and could mitigate, could work on climate change and adaptability, I think the as a whole world can combat climate change and could save the earth from global warming, I think. And I am thankful to UNDP, UNCDF, and European Union for the support. And I think in future also I could lend a helping help from this external funding agencies. And I am thankful for support till now. And if I ask representative of UNCDF and UNDPA, if we are we are interested, we are trying to mitigate climate change adaptability in our local society. So if we happen to come up with the such proposals to your agency, could you be able to help us lah? Could you be able to help us in terms of funding lah? So in terms of funding and expertise, I already mentioned that our country, Bhutan, don't have any expertise in climate studies. So basically, we have to lend a helping hand from the external source. So could you be able to help us if you come with the proposals?
Well, I think that's for our other panelists. Maybe if you have any points, any advice you could give. But I'd also be interested to hear from you, Vasco, if responding to Vivek's point there on private sector. I mean, do you see where you are now, you're a community leader, do you see opportunities for getting private sector involved in working on adaptation and paying for this the work that's being done at your community level? Are there opportunities for not just international and traditional donors to get involved? Do you see opportunities to bring in business?
Yeah, I think we can collaborate with the international agencies too to mitigate this. So I think if we can't collaborate with international agencies who are expert, we alone could not do this in a good way. So I think it's a mandate for us to collaborate with the external agencies, international agencies, or private funding agencies to come up with a good result.
Indeed. Well, I'll just let Luke perhaps and Vivek respond if they want to. And just maybe to close, we have just 5 minutes left. Perhaps Vivek and Luke, you could really remind us once again what the efforts your organizations are making to really reach out to the local level, to get that capacity as strong as possible, to get those resources moving as much as we possibly can, and to really sort of identify what the main step is next for your organization as we go into this last run up to COP29. Vivek, may I perhaps start with you?
Yeah, I think this joint program will be a very important over the next 3.5, 4 years. We will give a lot of evidence and experiments that UNDP and UNCDF bring together of a joint up working across different levels of government. National, we are looking at sectors, sectoral initiatives, and we're looking at UNCDF doing it at a local government level. So I think this will be a very important project to demonstrate that if we can coordinate across multiple levels of government and multiple stakeholders, I'm not saying it will only bank on the public sector side, but you're also looking at partnerships with that the government can foster with the private sector as well. And although it is not limited to adaptation, but it is primarily focused on local-led adaptation. So we could have demonstrable, sustainable models of financing, both on the public and private sector side at the local government level. So, and in key sectors. So this is something to, we are very excited about our partnership with the UNCDF and to bring about real good, wholesome change at the local level. Over.
Thank you very much, Vivek. Luke, we have just 2 minutes left. Is there any last comment you want to make before I close the floor and thank our guest?
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I'll try to be very, very quick. Just to address the last point that Vivek has made previously. So scale, what are the intermediaries that can gather more money or make a better business case to then also receive through what we call vertical integration, receive the amount of projects that are popping up in every different localities, and that also might be more interesting. Both for an international finance proposal, but also for the private sector, for any sorts of different sources of financing. And I think Bangladesh or Cambodia are great examples of how that can work. To address the last question from Bhutan, I think through the program that Vivek was mentioning, so with the support of the Swedish government, more South-South cooperation, more exchanges between government officials, civil servants, project leaders, to understand what is being done and that is locally relevant, but also have a common voice in negotiations or in platforms such as COP29 to share a common message, because the impacts of climate change are perhaps different in terms of the shock, in terms of what are the specifics, but it is a common challenge. And sometimes people suffering it also not necessarily the first responsible for that change. So it's good to bring that common voice in those platforms and building partnerships. And again, turning to Bangladesh, Desmond, I'm sorry, but examples of technical institutes such as ICIMOD or other people that have the ability to mobilize the data, the climate science, to then provide that kind of support that Bhutan was asking for. So it's all about those partnerships as well. Thank you very much, and I hope this was helpful.
Thank you very much, Luke from UNCDF, Vivek from UNDP, Jesmal coordinating logic activities in Bangladesh, and of course, Bhaskar Chapagai, our local community leader from Bhutan. You've been terrific guests, an insightful panel. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for our audience joining online and in the Zoom meeting today. It's been a pleasure. I think we could just...
We would like to take